Hey there, and welcome back to Autism in Color. In this video, I'll explore part 2 of my life before my autism diagnosis, focusing on my middle and high school years. However, as a disclaimer, I do mention suicide and the loss of a loved one. Let's dive into my middle school years. Middle school was a whole new world for me. I was part of the eArts program from grades 6 to 8, where I finally got to be around other kids who loved the arts as I did. At first, it felt like a breath of fresh air, but as the days went by, my classmates started noticing my social quirks. In 6th and 7th grade, they teased me for wearing the same clothes, eating the same lunches every day. Academically, the arts were integrated into our lessons, like the time we did a dance project on biodiversity, since our science teacher also taught us dance. Those projects were cool, but I still struggled with algebra, paying attention, remembering things, organizing stuff, making friends, and dealing with sensory issues. The arts made school bearable, but it was still tough. There was this one day in 6th grade during math class when I was zoning out, staring at the posters and artwork on the walls. My teacher, who also taught visual arts, called me out saying, "Earth to Ariel," and mispronounced my name the whole year. Everyone turned to look at me. She asked if I had a headache from the math lesson, and when I said yes, the whole class laughed. This wasn't a one-time thing. She often singled me out for not paying attention. During tests, she'd walk around and chastise me for being distracted or taking too long to write answers. She was strict about having an organized binder with labeled page numbers, titles, and a table of contents. Random binder checks were a nightmare because I could never get it right and my grades suffered. 7th grade was more of the same, getting in trouble for not paying attention, forgetting class materials, being disorganized, and making careless mistakes on tests and assignments. I started bringing all my binders to every class because I kept on forgetting which ones I needed, and my peers and teachers would joke about me carrying my whole walker around. Homework took me forever to complete because I'd read the same paragraph over and over without remembering a thing. I usually turned it in on time but started it way too close to the deadline, which meant a lot of late nights. Despite all of this, I thrived in music class where I learned to play the violin, and we even competed regionally and nationally. During the summer, I was also part of theater camps. It started in elementary school with the 3D club and was followed by Performance Playhouse in middle school. In both camp levels, I unfortunately still experienced bullying and rejection from my neurotypical peers, but I surprisingly had a breakthrough in the second week of Performance Playhouse, where I befriended the other campers who didn't quite fit in like me. I remember at lunch we played Mario Kart on our Nintendo DS's and talked about our favorite cartoons. Although it hurt to have the first friend I made at camp ditch me for a more cooler and popular girl who joined in and broke up our friendship, I guess the moral arc of the universe bent towards justice, losing some fake friends in the process. Theater camp also indirectly helped me learn basic social skills in projecting my voice, improving my posture, and navigating how I perceive my body in relation to where others are around me moving around the stage. During the school year, gym class was my least favorite. I was clumsy and felt left out during team sports. I remember during the 12-minute run around the soccer field, I took a 12-minute walk, not really being able to keep up. The locker room was a hot spot for bullying. We were hitting puberty, and the other girls compared body types. I wasn't as developed as the others and got teased for it. Finding the right bra was hard because of my sensory issues, so sometimes I just wore a tank top. That only gave them more reasons to tease me for being underdeveloped and not wearing a bra. 8th grade was a game changer. I had a teacher who understood students with exceptionalities. Our class had a mix of neurodiverse students, and we often worked in focus groups with a special ed teacher. Learning in smaller groups helped me a lot, breaking down assignments into manageable parts. This made schoolwork easier. At this point, I hadn't heard about ADHD, Asperger's, or thought of myself as autistic. The media didn't show people who looked like me with these conditions. But when I did my own research, going through empirical articles, podcasts, archived webinars, and talks, especially through the work of Tony Atwood, I found stories of autistic adults diagnosed later in life, and for the first time, I saw myself in their journeys. Now on to high school. For high school, I first attended a large school, which was like walking into a college building. It was tough adjusting to this new routine, especially since it was twice the size of my middle school. I didn't know many people, and those that I did know had moved on and made new friends. Lunch was pretty lonely. I'd sit by myself on the large wooden benches next to the huge windows spanning one end of the hall to another, working on art, listening to music, or reading a book. In class, I struggled with the usual math, paying attention, being forgetful, organizing my belongings, making friends, and dealing with sensory issues. The constant moving between classrooms while navigating through a sea of obnoxious teenagers was overwhelming. High school was a whirlwind of confusing lingo like I rate it for approval and cheesed for feeling annoyed, which added to the challenge of navigating social dynamics and fitting in. However, I found solace in a class called Exploring Technology, where we did woodworking, tech design, computer science, media arts, and cooking. At home, things were tough as well. My dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and seeing him go through treatment was heartbreaking for our family. In the spring semester of my first year of high school, I was hospitalized for a suicide attempt, depression, and anxiety. Those 2 weeks in the hospital didn't help much. The staff had their own agenda and didn't connect my social and sensory differences to possible undiagnosed autism or ADHD. They mainly focused on medications, but my mom refused to let me take antidepressants, so I went through cognitive behavioral therapy without meds. Therapy sessions were hard, especially when they asked how I was feeling. It's hard for me to translate my thoughts and feelings into words. The staff thought I was being difficult for no reason. The fluorescent lights in the therapy rooms gave me headaches, and the staff's attitudes, micro-invalidating my differences, didn't help either. By 10th grade, I transferred to a different school closer to home. Surprisingly, I did well in English because my teacher was understanding and connected with me. But in 11th and 12th grade, English composition became a struggle again. Socially, high school was tough. Other students started developing their sense of sexuality and falling in love, but I didn't feel the same way. This led to peers questioning my sexuality, but I didn't budge on coming out as ace at the time, although they tried to out me. I preferred nature walks, journaling, arts and crafts, and indulging in sci-fi and adventure franchises. Luckily, I had a few friends who helped me navigate social situations and provided support when I felt overwhelmed. In March of 2015, my dad passed away from lung cancer. Losing him forever was hard to process, but I cried mostly in private. People assumed I wasn't grieving enough, not understanding how deeply I feel emotions. Expressing my feelings in a socially acceptable way was always a challenge. When asked how I felt, I often said I didn't know, meaning I couldn't process and articulate my emotions in a way others would understand, but I could easily relate to scenes in films or songs that reflected my feelings. After my dad's death, my mom informed the school, and I started working with the child and youth worker and resource teacher. They gave me extended time on assignments and tests, which helped. However, by grade 12, I was struggling to keep up with university level courses. Organizing my thoughts for writing assignments and essays was particularly challenging. I'd often run out of time for in-class essays and only managed to type out what I had written for that period at home. Consequently, I received mostly C's on English literature papers. Before I started my first year of high school, my 8th grade teacher gave us a form with recommendations on which stream I should pursue based on my current grades and personal qualities. She recommended that I take academic level courses, which would lead to university level classes in grades 11 and 12. By the time I sat in those higher level courses, I noticed I was one of the few Black students on a university track. This added another layer to my experience as a Black autistic student who didn't quite fit in with the other Black teens, who were often more laid back and outgoing. Meanwhile, I was more tense and introverted, preferring to do things by the book or in a specific way. The social dynamics were challenging, especially with the confusing high school lingo I talked about earlier. While others seemed to navigate social situations effortlessly, I often found myself on the outside, trying to understand both the linguistic and unwritten social rules of adolescence, including those specific to the Black community. There were expectations about how to dress, wear your hair, speak, as well as cultural references used for inside jokes, which further set my differences in stone. I remember the Black kids hollering to each other in the hallway saying, "Don't be a waste youth." I assumed it meant not to act poorly and waste your potential. This phrase reflected the social expectation that people of color often faced limited opportunities for upward mobility within the Ontario school system. Despite these challenges, I excelled in some electives like communications technology and media arts, but in grade 12, the workload increased and I fell further behind. The same happened in visual arts, where my projects took longer to complete than my peers. I loved these classes, but felt overwhelmed having too many ideas and not enough time to make it work. At the start of grade 12, I was hospitalized again for another suicide attempt. This time I was put on an antidepressant, but it didn't work well for me. After being discharged, I attended a day hospital program to ease back into school for 2 weeks while receiving accommodations such as extended time on assignments and tests or working in a quieter space. However, the school said they wouldn't put these accommodations on an IEP, even though they explained how I'd gradually return to classes and finish the semester. They probably thought I was embarrassed about needing help being on a university track and figured my mom would get defensive since she currently struggles to understand my autism now. In my final year, my mom started the paperwork to move to the US since her older brother filed for us several years back to move to the States, and by spring, we were invited to an interview at the US Embassy. This process interfered with my plans to apply to universities in the Greater Toronto area, but I thankfully graduated from high school despite the setbacks I overcame. We then moved to Georgia at the end of July 2017, closing one chapter and starting a new one. Thanks so much for joining me today, and remember, in our true colors, we find our strength. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.